Welcome to The Kingstonian, a podcast that profiles people who are passionate about what they do for a living, what organization they belong to, or the community they are a part of. Here is your host, Dave Cunningham.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Singer-songwriter Rob Watkins is back for a new conversation. This time around, we talk about getting new music recorded in its most original form, collaborating with other musicians whose style may be different from his, and, after decades entertaining, deciding what venue works best for him. Always a good time speaking with Rob. Here is that conversation recorded in late April 2022. Rob, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me again.
It's almost as if this is an annual affair that you and I do.
Yeah.
And in one sense, it's good because it gives us a sense to figure out exactly what you've been doing lately, some of the people you've been working with, and hopefully we can explore that in the course of the next little bit and see what's changed for you.
Yeah.
Let's begin by talking a little bit about the last time you and I sat down, and you were working with a company in Great Britain, a record company called Revolver Records.
Yep.
The plan was to get your music out to a different market. You were pursuing what's called the Americana market, or at least that's the label that was put on. Yeah. And maybe we start by having you explain to our folks listening what the Americana market is.
Americana is a combination, really, of country, folk, just those elements anyways, that kind of stripped down version of, you know, what we're used to listening to on AM radio, I guess, or what we used to be listening to on AM radio. So it is very much, acoustic guitar, bass, vocals as well. Minimal approach to the songs. That's basically the genre. But I mean, it's a pretty wide scope too, because, you know, we get lobbed in with obviously someone like Bob Dylan or his son Jacob Dylan, but there's another group I think called the Cactus Blossoms. Phenomenal group, very much Everly Brothers. So it's one of those music genres that's come full circle. You know, it started off in the late 1800s and early 1920s when recording finally came about. You had Mother Maybelle singing those songs, and it evolved from there, you know, and got into the blues and rhythm and blues and jazz and finally rock and roll. And like everything else on this planet, everything does just come full circle. So it's that style of music, of simplicity.
One of the things that the deal with the company gave you was exposure in markets that you really couldn't tap into yourself. Yeah. I recall seeing that your music was being played in Holland and countries in Western Europe. Yep. And there was a fella whose name I've forgotten, but he did an online internet radio show that featured Americana music, and the way he defined it was, as you've described the nature of the music, but it was everything but music by Americans. So it was Canadian and European and Australian and the whole. So you got some exposure there. Now, you've since switched away from that, from what I gather.
Well, we're still, I was just in touch with Paul Birch, who's the president of Revolver Records. And last year we kind of had this, we'd recorded this album, our third release, because that's what we were signed for, was 3 releases. They'd only put out 2. And so we were, sitting on the fence wondering what was happening, and they had a new team come in place that just didn't feel that the album was, sort of up their alley, if you will, and they weren't going to release it. So that, very disappointing for us. And fair enough, you get used to it. It's like, well, we've got 2 albums with these guys, and we're being played here and there and everywhere in Europe. And all of a sudden for them to say, nah, not our cup of tea right now. And, we're heading in a different direction with our releases. So there we were kind of left, wondering what is going to happen next. And there's only so much time left on our contract. So getting back to Paul, he said, listen, we haven't forgotten about you. Yes, we've taken a new approach this year, but, we're still interested in releasing your music. Not that album. Send us more. Mm-hmm. So that was a glimmer of hope for us, because, I honestly, Tom and I got really down about that. I mean, it's very frustrating and disappointing, your hard work and that. And again, as I would say to him, there's never a guarantee. Mm-hmm. When it comes to music, it is very hit and miss. And what we think is our strongest songs might not be. It's always up to the public. It's crazy when we first put out Boondog Quip, our A&R guy, he said, well, which songs do you think? This is what we think. And we said, no, we picked these 2 songs here. That's our strongest songs on the album. That was just a dumb move, looking back now. Because, we should have actually gone with what they were thinking. Well, this is what we hear, but we were very pig-headed, I guess. And so, it just gets back to the artist doesn't choose the hits. It's the public that chooses the hits, And
sometimes you have to rely on the record company people whose expertise is built upon many years of listening to all kinds of different people, and they have a different ear than you would, being so close to the music.
Sure, yeah.
Now, over the course of the conversation today, we'll talk about the kind of music that you're doing by yourself. Mm-hmm. You're doing music with Tom Harpel, and that's Watkins Harp.
Yeah.
You were also working on other projects, and we'll get to all of that in a second. But what I want to do now is focus a little bit on the latest LP that you have released on your own.
Yes.
And this is something I gather you recorded at home?
No, at Tom's, at our studio.
At Tom, okay.
Tamarack Studios. So, that came about because... Tom's daughter one of his daughters, I should say, lives in Florida, and they hadn't seen her in 2 years because of the pandemic. So they had a chance to go back down to Florida and visit with her. And I'd had a gob of songs. I mean, I literally had about 35 songs that I said to him, I just want to go in the studio and record them just as they are, just acoustic, vocal, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And so he said, okay. But 35 is a lot of songs, especially if you're going to plan on releasing them. And I was like, just people aren't into double albums and triple. No one wants All Things Must Pass. 3 albums, really? Oh, okay. So we decided, said, let's dwindle it down to 15 songs. Pick your best 15 songs. And I said, okay, but I'm still going with... the way I want to do this is a totally stripped down, where it's just me and vocals, and that's it.
Why would you choose that?
I mean, the first reason was I just wanted to do it for myself. It was purely for selfish reasons. I just wanted to have these songs recorded well, at a decent studio. And then I said, if at any point... because I wasn't going to release it, and then I sort of went back and forth, but I thought, no, this is just for me. I'll have these tunes, and that's it. And he said, okay, let's do that, but we can always go back to these songs and add things if you want, bass, guitar, more vocals. So we did it in 3 days, and the first day I recorded 5 songs, and what I liked about it, too, was Tom hadn't even heard most of these songs. So I literally, him being the producer, I'd play him the song once, and he'd go, wow, okay, let's go, hit record button, and off you went. So most of those songs you hear on the album are one take. Mm-hmm. I did them, and that was it. But I just wanted people to see, this is how songs start. And 2 examples I can think of that sort of drove me in that direction, to do this album this way, was I saw the group Aha from the 1980s doing their big hit that they had. Can't even remember the name of it, but anyways, they had. It
was a big hit, though.
It was, yeah. Well, if you say "aha," they'll know which one it is. "Take on Me," I think is the name of the song.
Right.
Anyways, I saw this thing on YouTube where it was just the lead singer and 2 piano players, and that's it. And they did that hit, and they'd slowed it down, and then so seeing that got me thinking of the group the Eurythmics, mm-hmm. and their first hit, "Sweet Dreams." And I remember hearing on the radio, this is like years ago now, just a version of Dave and I can't think of her name, but anyways, just doing guitar vocal of that song, and it was beautiful. Mm-hmm. But you still heard the essence of that song. Sure, we know the hits, that we heard on the radio, but you heard how that song started, and it gave you an insight to why it was a hit. Because any song that we hear now that's on the radio, and if you hear the Beatles or the Stones, it had to start some way. Mm-hmm. And usually it starts by either a vocalist and a piano, or a vocalist and a guitar. That's how it starts. So I thought, that's what I want to give the people, is this is how it starts. This is how it is. Mm-hmm. And if there's a little rough section or that's okay. As Tom always said, he wanted to put something out that sounded like I was sitting in someone's living room, that I was sitting in your living room, just saying, hey, Dave, I got this new song. Take a listen. Mm-hmm. And that's the album.
So from a business perspective, you recorded the CD for yourself primarily to get the songs out. So you've produced CDs. Now you are selling the CDs, presumably.
Yeah, I actually got a batch of 20 done. Set my standards really low here. But no, anyways, I got 20 done. And my whole thing was, Tom and I have not made a penny off of all these digital downloads. And, we've sold thousands and thousands of records. And that's not patting ourselves on the back. It's just we're very lucky and fortunate. But we made no money and never will make money that way. Mm-hmm. And that's the business right now. So when I released this album, I said I am not putting it on Bandcamp. It's not going on Deezer or Amazon or iTunes or anything else that Watkins Harp is on. It is not going out there. If someone wants the album, they contact me and I hand deliver it to them. Mm-hmm. And that's just a different experience because, number one, you're seeing who's buying your album. Yeah. The other way, you don't know. But this way, it's people contacting you. Yeah, I'd like a copy. Yeah. Oh, let me meet you here. There's $10. Great. There's the album. And you get to chat with them. And then again, from there, I said, I certainly am not going to, beat these people up for their take on the album. In other words, because Tom was saying, well, what does everyone think? I'm like, I don't know. I've gotten like 2 or 3 people and they really like it. I said, and I'm fine with that. Mm-hmm. Because when you start chasing people and, haranguing them and that, they have a tendency to go, oh, yeah, it's the greatest thing, and turn their back and go, I'm using that for a coaster. Like, that's... So you don't know.
But I thought... pizza cutter is what we need.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes it's just better to, again, let them sing your praises if they will. Yeah.
Talk about a couple of the songs on the album, and... as with most interviewers, I don't interview authors because that means I have to read a book. And that would take me forever.
Here's War and Peace.
But, I slap on the headphones and listen to the CD. So sure. There were a couple of tunes that stand out. There are a couple of tunes that I'll call quirky.
Yep.
For the sake of a description.
Yeah.
And that's the use of metaphors in the context of the song. Throw in the Towel is one that I particularly enjoyed listening to.
Funny little song, but we can relate to it, can't we, Dave?
Yes, we can. Some of us more than others. Yeah. And Down on the Ropes is another one.
Yeah.
And when it comes to putting metaphors together, as a songwriter, how is it that you do that?
It's tough. It's really tough. I mean, the way I write songs, too, is I usually write the music first and then the lyrics come later. And lyrics are tough. What I've learned to do over the years is to speak from my soul, speak from my heart. And yes, okay, so, you're trying to look for metaphors and use the right ones, and you never know if you do. But that was just an easy one, like... Down on the Ropes was just, me having fun talking about marriage. I've been married for 30 years and all the trials and tribulations and ups and downs, but something that not only I can relate to, but you can relate to, and someone else who might be in our age group can relate to. So it's really just drawing from life's experiences and hoping that you hit the mark with someone else, And I'm lucky that a lot of these songs, I'll take them to the guys in Old Pony, Bernie Smith and Dennis Smith. And Bernie is, he doesn't hold back. Let's just say that. If he doesn't think it cuts it, he'll tell you. So, I'm always experimenting. And every week I go there and he's like, well, what do you got that's new? And I remember playing him that song, the second one you named there. But anyways.
Down on the Road.
No, the other one, sorry.
Throw in the Towel.
Throw in the Towel, thank you. Yeah. Can't even remember the titles of my own songs. But So I played them Throw in the Towel. I mean, they just laughed because they said, yeah, that's it. I mean, you use the right words. But it's not easy. Lyrics are a tough thing to do. And with Watkins harp, Tom will actually give me a set of lyrics. And then he'll have a basic idea of, whether he wants it a fast tempo or a slow tempo, but he doesn't have a key picked out. So it's a real Elton John, Bernie Taupin thing where it's like, here's the lyrics, go for it. And man, it's a tough go either way.
Yeah. With respect to the music on the album, you've already alluded to it. So it's basically guitar, voice, and the occasional human trumpet or trombone or whatever you want to call it. I don't even know what you describe that as.
Well,
it's not humming.
It's just mimicking a trombone or a trumpet, and that comes from the Mills Brothers. I listened to a lot of Mills Brothers years ago. And when it was the actual four brothers playing together before the father had joined.
And for the younger crowd, that's a group from the 50s and 60s?
Earlier than that, yeah. Okay. 30s and 40s.
I remember them. Yeah.
So they'd started in the 1930s. And so the one brother, the heavyset one, he would do this fake trumpet. Because, in the 1930s, they just, either those people weren't around or they couldn't afford to have these musicians play. Mm-hmm. So they mimicked everything. If it was drums, if it was trumpet, trombone. So I just nicked it off of them. That was completely Mills Brothers, fake trumpet playing. Michael Myers does the same thing.
Yeah.
So just having fun. Really, that's all it was.
How would you describe the music on the album from a genre perspective?
Genre, I think it still lies in the Americana roots, folk, more leaning towards the folk. Because I was really chasing after that Bob Dylan-ish mid-1960s Newport Folk Festival thing. I was really kind of aiming for that.
Before he became electrified?
Yeah, before the guys in the band joined him.
Mm-hmm. The one song that stuck out from a country perspective, and I think it's called The Lonely Side of Emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was listening to you do that, I was thinking Hank Williams Sr.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's exactly who I was going for. I was mimicking him and songwriting style and that. Again, that's not an easy thing to do. You know, I mean, you can pretend to say, I sound like, or I want to be like, and when it comes down to doing it, it's pretty tough. But yeah, it was me doing my imitation of Hank.
When we were getting ready to do this conversation, you had sent me some information about some of the people that you've got projects on the go with or are about to get on the go with.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd run through that list because some of them I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know the style of music that they're famous for, and I'd imagine the people listening may not be aware as well.
Yeah.
And David Patrick Murphy.
Yes. David is from Florida. He's been in Canada for about the past 20 years or so. And he's put out about, I think, 5 albums here in Canada. He was with a group in Florida called Jesse and the Gunslingers. That's who he's best known for. And they had quite a following down there in the southern states.
What kind of music did they perform?
His is, again, very Tom Petty-ish rock and roll. So another, something I'm familiar with, which I'd done in the past. And the way that came about, that meeting with him, was I was just doing some session work. I got called up by the studio, and they needed a bass player for these songs. So I went in. There was myself, Duncan Holt on drums, and Ken Hall on keyboards. And we ran through the bulk of the album. I think there's 10 songs on the album, and I think I did about 7 or 8 of them. We did them all in one fell swoop, day's work. But there was something about him that I just really liked. And his visions for things and, him wanting to do videos and perform live. And just one of those guys that I instantly clicked with. Kind of hard to explain, but so I'm excited in that sense of working not only with him, but these other musicians where, I might actually take a back seat, if you will. I'm just the session guy or I'm a side player. And that's kind of neat too, because let them, their stars shine, if you will. But, the most important thing is I got to be into their music too. You know, it's a two-way street. Are they into mine and I'm into theirs?
So are you doing a project with him, or are you just going to do the backup stuff?
We finally finished the album. It took 5 years to finish that album, which for me is painful. Because
that's his album now.
That's his album,
okay.
Yeah. Which he's just released. And that's all over, you know, like the platforms that I aforementioned. So it's already out there on those platforms. And then he's got another album that he's going to be starting, I think, in the next month or so. We're actually just finishing up a video for one of his songs off of the current album that he released. That video should be done in the next 2 months or so.
Are you in the video?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah, you'd have to see it, but... So yeah, it's very interesting to work with someone like him. And again, it's for me, you know, I've been so tied into, and I still love it, you know, the genre of music that I'm playing with Tom or Bernie and Dennis. You know, it is very Americana, folky, country, and that's great, and I love it to death. But I still want to put on my rock and roll uniform and get out there and play. So, yeah.
Tom Ravel.
Mm-hmm.
Little Betty.
Yep.
I've heard the name, but I have not heard the music, so I don't know what they play or did play.
Well, again, very rock and roll, very Stonesy, you know.
Okay.
Tom's a great songwriter. Him and his brother Bob had started the band back in the late 80s, I think it was.
And they're a local band, right?
They're a local band. You know, Little Betty is that band that I know myself and Duncan Holt, we always said, they should be as big as the Tragically Hip. They're just that good, you know? And they've got a core audience. Tom is a smart guy because he really turned me on to this idea of, he said, you know, as artists, we're always chasing numbers. So you're looking on YouTube to see how many views your video has and how many downloads do you have and this and that. And, you know, you never live up to your own expectations. And he said, listen, it's not about that. He said, Little Betty, over the course of the past 30 years, has always had the same, you know, whatever it is, 200, 500, 1,000 people, but they're there constantly. They've been there for 30 years. They will be there for the next 30 years. He said, that's what you should focus on. He said, sometimes it's not the big numbers. That's nice.
Yeah.
But he said, wouldn't you just want to know that you have a core of people following you that will always be there and look forward to what you're going to release or the next project that you're doing? And so he really turned my head around to that and saying that it's not about the numbers. Like I said, with Euphoria, when I released it, I honestly said, I'm going to print 20. If I can sell those 20, I've done my job. I'm happy. And I think I've sold 30 albums, Dave, so I'm ecstatic now. Yeah, it's a great feeling. And again, it isn't about the numbers.
It's about loyalty.
It really is.
Yeah. And people identifying with what you're doing.
They do.
Yeah. And they want to get more of it.
Yeah.
Christopher Jackson and Doug Vanderhoorden.
Yes.
I've heard those two names.
Yeah.
They're local.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the two of them and your relationship to them.
Well, I've known of them for the past couple of years, three or 4 years, I think. Both local boys. Chris is always playing down at the Blue Martini every Friday night. You can go and see him there. And I met him, I think, about 2 years ago now. And we hit it off, but lost touch. Things happen. And then I did an interview a couple of months back on CJAI, Amherst Island. And in the middle of the interview with Sue Dodds, she said, "Oh, what's your next song going to be?" And I said, "Well, I've got this song. I've never played it live. I wrote it for Chris Jackson, who was going through a rough time a couple of years ago, and it stemmed from that." And she says, "Really? Have you ever played it for Chris?" Now, remember, this is live on the air. Mm-hmm. She said, "Have you ever played for Chris?" And I said, "Well, again, no, this is the first time I've played it really for anybody." She says, "Well, hold that thought. I'm going to get a hold of him," gets her iPhone out, calls him up, says, "Chris, take a listen. If you're out there, Like, listen to this. Rob wrote you this song, and go. So I play this song, and he obviously responded on Facebook and got a hold of me personally and said, thank you so much. And I said, hey, let's get together. Let's jam. Because that's what I am. I'm all about, let's just get together and jam. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, so what? So he graciously invited me over to his house, and gave him a copy of Euphoria, which he really liked. And there was a song off of it that, I said, how would you feel about putting more onto this song? He said, what did you have in mind? And he had actually, when we were jamming, he'd picked up a mandolin. I just started playing along, and I was like, wow. I said, that sounds phenomenal. I said, can you do that again? Just, we'll record that track onto the existing track. Sure. So he did that. Now, Doug, he came through or about from Bon Evans.
Okay.
And I think I'd seen Doug playing in Bath. And again, a phenomenal performer. He's one of these guys who plays piano, a great drummer, just like Chris. These guys are multi-talented. You give them a blade of grass and they'll make it sound musical. And so Doug was the same thing, where he was good friends with Chris. I think he still does play with Chris from time to time, does drumming. And so he's doing piano on this same song off of Euphoria, adding piano to it. They're just two guys that they're great personalities on stage. Off stage, they're just great friends. And again, it's just outside musicians. I love Tom to death, and I've known the guy for over 40 years. But when you're in a band, it's one of those, you get used to each other so much, and you feel that sometimes you just want something else, something different sounding.
You crave variety.
Variety. And I do. I always have. And so, luckily, these two gentlemen said, yeah, let's work together. Let's do something. So, in regards to Chris and Doug, we are in the process of redoing this one song off of Euphoria. But, I've got a batch of other songs, and I'm like, hey, guys, tell you what. Let's get together. Let's do something. Maybe do a show here or there. I really want to have some shows here at my place, outdoors. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be something really exciting, and it's that thing of never knowing what's going to come out of it. Mm-hmm.
The last guy on my list is Spencer Evans.
Oh yeah, I think you've interviewed him.
Yes, I have.
Times. Yeah.
So, what appeals to you about Spencer Evans?
What appeals to me about Spencer Evans? He's quirky, which I love, because so am I. Well, no, that's the best word I think to describe him. He's quirky. Yeah. He's a great entertainer, phenomenal player. Just, he fits in anywhere. You take him a song and you don't have to tell him what to do. Obviously, he's that talented. And I worked with him, I think it was last year. I first met him last year. He's just one of those guys I've always wanted to meet. So I met him last year and asked him if he wanted to do a couple of tracks out at the studio, which we did. And then this year, I got, throughout the pandemic, I wasn't getting together with anyone. He wasn't either. So we just kind of laid low. And then I contacted him a couple of months ago again and said, listen, I got another song, one off the Euphoria album. And I said, put your treatment on it. Let's see what you can do. And of course, he just blew me away. Mm-hmm. Again, another guy that I get him. I love his music. It's a different style of music for me. And what I've learned, too, is that all these musicians that I've named, and there's so many more, I like working with them because they're better than me. They really are. Mm-hmm. And I can only learn and grow from that. So any of these musicians, it's all through the past 40, 45 years I've been playing, I've always taken little snippets from the greats and said, okay, I can use that. And they taught me this, and they taught me that. That's what it's about. Surround yourself with people who play or are better than you, and you're going to grow.
Now, all through your musical career, you have done all sorts of different kinds of music, and I would venture to say you probably started off with more rock than anything else in the early days.
Yeah.
So these days, you're, like you said, you're more Americana, folk, country-ish. So if you are working with people who don't do the same kind of music as you are doing now, how easy is it for you to adapt or bring their style into your style?
I think it just tends to morph. It's really what happens, is that I still, these songs are written a certain way. But working with a musician who might stylistically be a little bit different, as an artist, that's what you want. You want someone to bring something different to the table. You just don't want this sterile, I'm not, as a producer, I've always worked with people and said, bring me what you've got. Let me hear what you have. Let me hear your ideas. Yes, this is I suppose it's like building a house. You say, well, we're building a bungalow here, fellas. 30 by 20 feet with a 3 and 12 pitch roof. And yes, that's the sort of framework for it. But you're going to decorate that house differently. You're going to put different windows in it. You can manipulate the original is what I'm saying. And that's what I like. That's really thrilling, is to be able to go to these people, not demand something from them, which they all could do. I could go to Spencer tomorrow and say, this is what I want you to play it, and here's the money for it, and off we go. And a lot of guys or producers might do that. I've just never worked that way. I've always been like, let's see what you got. And, sometimes, even with Spencer, as a great example, is I brought him, I think, 4 songs originally. We ended up recording just 1. And the other 3, 2 of them, I brought him the songs as they were, and he was like, nah, I think you should change it and do it in this style. I was like, okay. I went home and I tried it, and I was like, yeah, it's just not working for the song. So, that's going to happen. It's not like I was going to pick up my bag of marbles and run, but I just said to him, that's not really what I'm hearing or what I want, so let's leave it. And if we do come back to it, great. But
performing. Mm-hmm. Over the past couple of years, most musicians have not had the opportunity to get up on stage and perform for a crowd. Mm-hmm. Some people have gone the Facebook route where they have done a show in their living room. Mike Myers is one example that comes to mind, and he's done a lot of that. These days, I get the impression you don't do a lot of performing on stage. No,
I haven't, especially because of the COVID thing.
But even after, let's say COVID's eased off.
It's eased off. Well, my sort of view on it has changed, is that I know, like, in regards to Tom is retired. He said he's just not going to perform anymore. So from that side of things, Watkins Harp is just a strictly recording group, which I'm fine with. With Bernie and Dennis and Old Pony, we do want to perform. But we've been doing, or the past 2 years, we've been doing this garden party for Mavis Livingston down on Ontario Street. And literally, it's 12 people, and, we get paid. There's a tip bucket there that she sets up, and we get paid from that. It's the best gig I've ever done. So I remember coming back from the last one last August, and raced home, and I told Trish, I said, this is the way I want to do it from now on. I said, I want to do what I think they're called at-home parties or at-home concerts. It could be what they're called.
Porch concerts.
Concerts, very much. Yeah. And I said, that's what I want to do from here on in. I'm not interested in playing the bars. And I understand from a bar owner's standpoint, they want you to be playing cover tunes. They want to sell beer. They want to fill the dance floor so that they can sell more beer. And people have to, they want to hear songs that they know. Mm-hmm. And I said, I just don't want to do that. I'm a songwriter. I want to perform my songs, albeit for a small audience, but that's okay. It gets back to what I said before, is that I'd rather have a small core of people who are there to see me for my originals and appreciate them. I'm happy doing that. I've done the bar scene. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do the bar scene anymore. And there's no money in it either. I'm too old to go and drive an hour or 2 hours to play for $30 and a beer. Forget it.
And to carry around all the amplifiers.
Yeah, wow.
The Old Pony, we've talked about them a couple of times during the course of this conversation. That's Dennis and Bernie Smith, and they're not related, correct?
They are. Actually, they're second cousins or something.
Twice removed or something like that.
Yeah.
The three of you came down to the radio station CFRC at one particular point when I was doing a Monday morning shift.
Yeah.
And you carried the amplifiers into the station.
That's right. I remember that. Yeah.
But you have performed with them. I know that you've done sets at the RCHA Club downtown.
Yep.
They have a long history as well in the music business.
Oh, yeah.
Give us a bit of an overview of what they have done.
Of the RCHA?
No, of Dennis.
Dennis
Bernie.
and Bernie, sorry. They were originally together in a group called the Chateaus in the 1960s. And, I think Bernie started playing right out of the womb. So they played and opened up for the Who at the Memorial Center in 1968. So that was their big kind of claim to fame. But, they'd been playing the local scene during that time and had quite a following. Dennis branched out more in the late 1970s, I think, into country. And he played with his brother in different bands, with his dad as well. And then Bernie had played, as you know, with Percy and the Teardrops. And they'd toured across Canada and everywhere else. And then, so...
How did you hook up with them?
I'd hooked up with Bernie through Jim Sherwood. And that was back in 2017. And so that was a weird kind of the way that happened. Is I ran into Jim at a grocery store, and I'd recorded this song up at Westport at Summit Sound, and I said, I want to do a video for it. Would you be interested in just, miming the drums? Oh, yeah, sure. I said, well, come out to my place. You can hear it and listen to it. So we're listening to the song, and his first words were, wow, you know what? Let me call Joe Brady, right, who has since passed on. But he said, let me phone Joe. He'd be great for this project. We can get him playing bass on the video. And I said, yeah, well, that'd be cool. And I'd worked with both of them in the 90s and had admired them. So we went out to Joe's place, and we were rehearsing that song and a few others that I brought, a few other originals. And then Joe said to Jim and myself, he said, who would be perfect for this is Bernie Smith. And I knew of Bernie, but I'd never met him. And so Joe literally says, hang tight, picks up the phone, calls Bernie, says, Bernie, listen, I got this guy. I'm not sure if you know him, Rob Watkins. He's a songwriter, and you'd be perfect for this project. And Bernie was like, yeah, sure. Why not? So he came along into another practice, and the four of us got together and rehearsed these songs. So that was kind of the genesis of things, or the starting of it. And then, as I said, unfortunately, with that group, Joe had passed away like a year later after we had joined forces, I should say. So that really just kind of disbanded us. We were like, well, without Joe, none of us wanted to do it. We all went our separate ways. And I hadn't seen Bernie in a few months. And then I ran into him where I work. And he said, hey, do you want to get together and jam? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to. I thought you were retired. He goes, well, let's just get together and jam. It'll just be for us. And I said, sure. So we got together. And then the one time I went over to Bernie's place, Dennis was there. And he plopping away on bass. And here's this guy who's just like, he was so gung-ho, and enthused. And then I said, let's play one of my songs, being big-headed. And they liked it. And it just sort of spiraled from there. And we just knew we had a different sound. And then we said, well, let's do a couple of gigs. And, RCHA was perfect. And they liked us. And it gave us a chance, just beginning, we could do some of our originals. But now it's gotten to the point, like with Bernie and Dennis, where we just said, all we want to do is play our originals. Each one of us have strong enough songs.
Yeah.
And it's great because it's three of us. It's not one artist up there plugging away. So that's how it all sort of came about.
And the RCHA Club is a nice place to play. I've been there to see, like, the Big Fat Horn Band plays there. And so they're, 10 or 11 people?
Yeah.
And then you can have a small, intimate approach where you have 2 or 3 people playing.
Yeah, it's perfect.
So it's a nice little spot.
Yeah.
I can recall the appearance that you made on the radio show, the three of you, a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. But I did see Bernie when he was doing a show with Cliff Edwards, and they were doing a Johnny Cash, June Carter Cash tribute show with Tegan McLaren and the bass player, whose last name I think is St. Onge, but we can't remember what his first name is.
That's terrible. We love you, whoever you are.
But Bernie was playing guitar on that, lead guitar.
Yeah.
And I was really impressed with the variety of stuff he plays and the effortless approach to playing guitar. Bernie, and I'm always amazed at those kind of musicians that don't seem to be struggling to pick the notes or to do whatever.
Yeah. He's an amazing talent. Bernie, I've always said that. I mean, he's a favorite vocalist of a lot of places. I know, like Dave Daw up at Summit Sound. You know, Dave has worked with a lot of people. And he said, you know, Bernie is probably like one of the top vocalists he's ever worked with. Phenomenal session player. You know, like as you say, he can just pick out any genre. He'll play it. Well, he's got that background. But, you know, Bernie was always like that. So Tom and Bernie, I think, went to school together. And I remember Tom always telling me these stories of saying, you know, Bernie was like 12 years old and got up with Dennis and Pete Willis was their drummer. And he said, these kids were doing the Beatles better than the Beatles. And it was Bernie. It was this kid. He had this voice that was amazing. And, you know, Bernie's hard on himself because, I mean, he tends to, I'm always egging him on, bring another original, and, you know, you got stuff in your back pocket, I know, and he's always very, no, you do the singing, and I'm like, I don't know. It's frustrating for me because knowing that I'm working with a talent that great, and number one, I'm privileged, I'm lucky, and I'm thankful because he's taught me a lot, but, you know, when you have someone like Cliff Edwards saying, come on along and play with me, you've done all right for yourself. Because Cliff doesn't suffer fools. So
I'm looking at people like Cliff and Bernie and yourself who have been doing this a long time. So for yourself, let's look down the road 5 years. What are you doing in the next 5 years musically?
Still recording. Hopefully writing better than I am now. That's always a dream. I think I would like to be performing more, but as I said, more, you know, these in-home concerts, smaller venues, things of that nature. Yeah, I really do want to bring our music out to a few more people. So yeah, hopefully I'll always be doing the recording. I mean, I'll be doing that until they put me in the ground. So, but it'd be nice to get out there and play, but selective gigs, I guess. Yeah. And I look to people like, you know, great example, Chris and Dee. I love these girls. They're phenomenal. Chris and Dee have gotten to a point, I think, like us, where they've said, here's what we want to do. Here's what we do best. And let's go down that avenue. Yes, there's other opportunities. You're not going to see Chris and Dee playing, you know, a bunch of cover tunes down at the Blue Martini. It's just not going to happen. And I admire them for that because they're sticking to their guns. Or another person, too, is Miss Emily. Whether you love her or hate her, this girl has said, this is me, this is what I'm doing, this is what you're paying, but this is what you'll get. Yeah. So those are the people I look to. So hopefully in 5 years' time, I can have achieved what they've achieved. Yeah.
The flexibility to do the kinds of things you want to do.
Yeah, it's not being self-serving or, well, maybe it is. I don't know. But it's just, again, you get to a point in your life where you say, what makes me happy? Yeah. And that's what's going to make me happy is continuing doing what I'm doing, writing songs, working with other artists. And you never know what's going to happen.
Well, we look forward to hearing what's going to come out of Rob Watkins' head over the next several years. And
that's scary.
Yeah. We don't want to get too detailed about what's going to come out. But in any event, I want to thank you very much for the time you've given us today, and all the best to you.
Well, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Singer-songwriter Rob Watkins. And if you want more information on his latest collection of songs called Euphoria, send him a message through his Facebook page. Thanks very much for listening.
The theme music for the podcast is Stasis Oasis, written and performed by Kingston musician Tim Aylesworth. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions about any of the episodes, please send a note to thekingstonianpodcast@gmail.com. For details on upcoming guests, follow us on Facebook. The Kingstonian Podcast is hosted by Dave Cunningham and produced in Kingston, Ontario, Canada.